to many, many years of lies being told about me and my family, there comes a point where, again, going back to the relationship between certain members of the family and the tabloid press.
Breaking news from London has exploded across headlines, ripping apart the carefully curated image that Prince Harry has spent years projecting. A sealed financial dossier, reportedly leaked from the ultra-secure archives of St James's Palace, has revealed a shocking truth. The Duke of Sussex has been hiding a verified debt crisis of $100 million, £150 million, that threatens to obliterate everything he has painstakingly built in California. And this is not tabloid speculation, not rumour, not whispers from unnamed insiders. This is hard, documented evidence of financial collapse on a scale that would devastate even the richest Hollywood celebrities. While the public assumed King Charles might be planning a quiet reconciliation with his estranged son during a holiday season, something far more dangerous and urgent was unfolding behind palace walls. Late last night, a ghostly summit shook London to its core. Unmarked Range Rovers cut through rain-slicked streets, carrying senior royals, not to a cosy family dinner at Clarence House, but to an emergency financial audit at St James's Palace. On the polished mahogany table, the topic was not forgiveness or fractured relationships. It was solvency. It was survival. It was a question the monarchy could no longer ignore. Could they afford to be linked to Prince Harry any longer? For years, the palace had played defence, covering for Harry through his explosive interviews, his tell-all books, and his high-profile media projects. But tonight, the strategy changed. Confronted with an urgent plea for a massive bailout to save the Montecito mansion and cover mounting debts, Prince William and the King's financial enforcers made a historic decision. They are not just cutting off Harry from royal funds. They're allowing creditors to move in, watching as the California dream crumbles before their eyes with chilling precision. The question haunting Buckingham Palace tonight is devastating in its simplicity. How does a prince, born into unimaginable wealth, accumulate $100 million in debt? And why won't his own family save him? The man at the head of the table, the one holding the ledger that explains why panic is spreading across the Atlantic, was none other than Sir Michael Stevens, keeper of the Privy Purse, famously known in royal circles as the living ledger. Stevens does not view the monarchy as a centuries-old family saga. To him, it is a corporation, one that must survive no matter the personal feelings or blood ties. The financial health of the institution comes before any individual, including princes. The report Stevens presented to King Charles and Prince William was nothing short of a forensic dissection of financial disaster. It was stripped of emotion, stripped of sympathy. It was raw numbers, pure mathematics, laid bare in columns and spreadsheets that told a story of catastrophic mismanagement. Your Majesty, this is not scandal. This is mathematics, and the numbers are unforgiving, Stevens reportedly said as he opened the dossier to reveal what he called the anatomy of debt. The breakdown was terrifying. $100 million evaporated in ways that would make any financial planner shiver. Each failed venture, each legal battle, each lavish spending decision was catalogued in brutal detail. The room fell silent as Stevens walked the royals through every category of expenditure. King Charles's face reflected increasing pain. Prince William's jaw tightened. Princess Anne, who insisted on attending despite the late hour, sat stone-faced, absorbing every grim detail. They weren't just witnessing the failure of one man's financial planning, they were seeing the consequences of burning bridges with an institution that had always acted as an invisible safety net. The first anchor, Montecito, revealed a debt of $14.65 million. Stevens outlined the mortgage, purchased in 2020 for just over $14 million, but it wasn't the principal that stunned the room. It was the variable interest terms, hidden in the fine print, now sky-high due to post-pandemic US interest rate spikes. As the Federal Reserve battled inflation, the property was not just an asset, it was actively consuming cash. One palace insider explained the burn rate was nothing short of astronomical. Property taxes alone exceed $200,000 annually. Full-time staff, including housekeepers, groundskeepers, security coordinators, and private chefs, cost millions per year. The famously lush gardens, designed to shield the family from paparazzi and drones, rack up another six-figure annual expense. Stevens reportedly told The Room that the estate requires Hollywood-level income just to break even, and Prince Harry hasn't had a blockbuster in a long time. Media deals meant to fund this lifestyle have collapsed. Netflix cut ties after a documentary series failed to meet expectations. Spotify ended their contract early, publicly branding the Sussexes as grifters. Book deals were completed, but advances vanished, and speaking engagements dried up as public interest waned and backlash intensified. The Montecito mansion had transformed from a symbol of independence and success into a crushing financial albatross. Then came what Stevens called the vanity tax. $28 million in legal fees. Every lawsuit, every litigation obsession, every perceived slight Harry had fought in court accumulated staggering costs. Stevens highlighted the failed VAC case, where Harry sued to keep taxpayer-funded police protection. After stepping back from royal duties, he not only lost the case, but was ordered to pay millions in legal fees to the opposing side, the very government he had sued. This is burning capital to buy silence, Stevens explained, and yet silence was never achieved. Court transcripts became public. Testimony became ammunition for critics. Money disappeared into billable hours that produced nothing of tangible value. Libel cases dragged on, consuming fees while generating damaging headlines. Privacy lawsuits created a Streisand effect, amplifying exactly what they sought to hide. Palace analysts concluded Harry's litigation strategy was deeply flawed. He fought emotionally, not strategically. He wanted vindication, not return on investment. He wanted to punish perceived enemies, not calculate whether the cost of victory exceeded its value. One legal observer noted, Harry is fighting battles no court can ever win, seeking validation, acceptance, and recognition for being right, a reward no judge can give. The truly devastating revelation: much of this legal warfare was financed through loans and credit lines, based on the assumption the royal family would cover shortfalls. Lenders assumed incorrectly. King Charles would never let his son default. That assumption is about to be tested. Finally, Stevens unveiled the paranoia premium, $31 million in security costs. Without Metropolitan Police protection after stepping back from royal duties, Harry hired private contractors, ex-Navy SEALs, former Secret Service agents, elite bodyguards charging premium rates by the hour. The security apparatus resembles that of a head of state facing active threats, not a celebrity living in one of America's safest communities. Multiple armed guards rotate in shifts, armored vehicles patrol the grounds, counter-surveillance technology monitors every move, and travel security accompanies every trip outside Montecito. Harry is paying for presidential-level security on a podcaster's budget. Stevens's assessment was brutal but precise. The vicious cycle is clear. Harry fears for his family's safety, a fear that may be partially legitimate but is certainly amplified by leaving the institutional protection he once took for granted. Those fears drive security spending, which drains finances, which forces him to pursue high-profile media deals to generate income, feeding a feedback loop of exposure, publicity, and financial pressure. But Stevens didn't stop there. The dossier also revealed ongoing operational costs, failed business ventures, and miscellaneous lifestyle expenditures that, combined, added millions more to the debt pile. Luxury cars, private jets, lavish vacations, and even the cost of maintaining multiple properties outside Montecito contributed to the hemorrhage of funds. These weren't one-off splurges. They were structural financial drains, recurring, unrelenting, and compounding. Every dollar laid bare in the ledger reflected a lifestyle divorced from the reality of sustainable management. It was a life fueled by assumptions of continuous bailouts and unlimited goodwill from the royal family, a safety net that, as of last night, has been officially withdrawn. By the end of the night, the picture was stark. The Montecito estate, legal battles, Hollywood failures, streaming collapses, and the paranoia premium combined into a nearly unmanageable financial storm. What had started as a dream of freedom and independence had transformed into a financial nightmare that could, if left unchecked, collapse the California fantasy entirely. And yet, even in this bleak assessment, Stevens ended on a final, chilling note. The cycle isn't over. The financial pressures will continue to drive Harry into media deals, speaking tours, and public projects, all designed to offset spiralling costs. The very fears that drive his security spending also perpetuate the need for income. And income itself often comes with public scrutiny, backlash, and further legal entanglements. It's a trap, a loop, and the ledger shows there's no easy exit. The final thought that hangs over Buckingham Palace, over Montecito, and over Harry himself is this: the California dream has become a financial tightrope, and with every dollar spent, every legal battle fought, every private security expense logged, that tightrope grows thinner. The world watches as a prince struggles to maintain a lifestyle born from centuries of institutional support that is now withdrawn. The man who once stood at the heart of royal privilege is navigating a reality that is ruthless, unforgiving, and entirely his own making. The security costs create a vicious cycle. Harry genuinely fears for his family's safety, fears that may be legitimate, but are certainly amplified by leaving the institutional protection he once took for granted. Those fears drive security spending that drains his finances. Financial pressure forces him to pursue media deals that generate publicity. Public attention feeds the machine, and in Harry's case, the more eyes on him, the greater his sense of needing extreme security. Every headline, every social media trend, every celebrity gossip cycle inflates the paranoia premium. Stevens's conclusion was chilling. Prince Harry isn't just temporarily broke. He isn't a celebrity going through a rough patch. He is operating a business model that is structurally insolvent, a system that loses money the second he wakes up. Every new streaming disaster, every half-baked media deal costs him another $26 million, and this is just scratching the surface. Beyond the Montecito mortgage, the staggering legal fees, and the sky-high security costs, the audit exposed the other catastrophic pillar of collapse, the media empire that was supposed to save him. Netflix, announced with fanfare in 2020, promised a headline-grabbing $100 million for multiple projects: documentaries, docuseries, feature films, scripted shows, even children's programming. The promise was audacious. Establish Harry and Meghan as content creators on par with the Obamas, who had landed their own multi-year deal. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to run a production company. The first documentary series they produced grabbed initial attention, fueled by curiosity, controversy, and royal intrigue. But viewership tanked. Audiences tuned in once, then vanished. Subsequent episodes saw massive drops. Critics blasted the content as self-indulgent, tone-deaf, and lacking universal appeal. Netflix expected follow-ups. They were pitched, scripts were commissioned, projects stalled, concepts were rejected. Nothing moved forward with speed, quality, or any semblance of professional discipline. Eventually, Netflix ended the relationship quietly, refusing to renew the deal. According to financial analysts, the Sussexes likely received only a fraction of the promised $100 million, maybe $25 to $30 million, much of which was swallowed by production costs, staff salaries, and overhead. The Spotify deal collapsed even more spectacularly. After just 12 episodes of Meghan's Archetypes podcast, far fewer than the multi-year commitment they had agreed to, the platform pulled the plug. Public humiliation followed swiftly. Executive Bill Simmons famously called them grifters on his podcast. Millions had been taken up front. Minimal content delivered. Commitments broken. The reputation damage was severe, and analysts say it now makes future deals nearly impossible to secure. Streaming failure wasn't just lost revenue. It was lost credibility, lost opportunity, and the collapse of the financial foundation that was supposed to make post-royal independence viable. The Oak Room Summit, the setting for last night's confrontation, was rich in symbolic weight. This was not the warm domestic setting of Clarence House, where King Charles often conducts family matters. This was the Oak Room at St. James's Palace, the historic beating heart of royal administration. Ambassadors are accredited here. State affairs conducted, cold, decisive decisions have been made at that table for centuries. Around the ancient mahogany sat 4 people: King Charles III, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Sir Michael Stevens. The atmosphere was reportedly tense and heavy, reminiscent of the legendary Sandringham Summit of 2020, but with stakes that felt even more immediate. King Charles, visibly older and torn between duty and paternal instinct, spoke first. Insiders say his instincts were deeply paternal. Looking at the $100 million debt, Charles saw more than numbers. He saw public humiliation that could tarnish the crown forever. "We cannot have a son of the king appearing in an American bankruptcy court," Charles reportedly said, his voice weighted with the potential scandal. "It creates a spectacle we cannot control. It makes the monarchy look cruel and vindictive, letting him fall so far." Charles proposed a solution: a private settlement, a substantial loan from his personal wealth to cover Harry's most urgent debts, structured as a loan, not a gift, confidential, avoiding public spectacle. It would buy time, allow Harry to restructure finances, and, ideally, create sustainable income. Charles pleaded with the table. "We help him once more. We silence the creditors. We avoid a royal bankruptcy that every newspaper on earth would cover for months." But before the proposal could even land, the mood shifted. Prince William, calm but deadly precise, made his move. He did not look to his father. He did not reach for empathy. He reached for evidence. From his briefcase, he produced a black leather-bound document, the Commercial Liability Assessment. "This is not about saving Harry," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "This is about preventing us from funding our own destruction." William's argument was methodical, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Bailing Harry out, he explained, would not be charity. It would not be family. It would be a catastrophic strategic error, threatening the monarchy far more than letting Harry face the consequences of his own choices. "We need to face the uncomfortable reality," he said, measured, devastating. "Harry is no longer a private citizen living his life in California. He is a media content producer. His primary product, us, and his business model requires our family to be villains in his narrative." The room fell silent. William outlined the palace analyst's findings. Harry's problem was a fundamental contradiction, one that made any bailout futile. The American media machine that pays Harry depends entirely on the victim narrative. If the royal family steps in to save him now, that narrative collapses. He would be forced to manufacture new grievances, new stories of betrayal, just to keep the content pipeline flowing. William pulled examples: the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir. Each reinforced the pattern. Each demonstrated that private accommodations were weaponized for public storytelling. Every act of compassion had been monetized, every conversation twisted into a narrative chapter. Prince William then reminded the table of his control over Duchy of Cornwall funds, historically used to support family members, including Harry. Not a single pound would cross the Atlantic to subsidize a lifestyle built on attacking the institution that generated that wealth. "This is not cruelty," William said. "This is basic fiduciary responsibility." He painted a chilling picture. A bailout today only postpones inevitable collapse tomorrow at an even greater cost. Harry's spending habits wouldn't change. His business model wouldn't change. 2 years from now, they would be back in this room facing an even larger debt with even fewer options. "He hasn't just burned bridges between us," William said. "He's erected toll booths on those bridges, charging admission to anyone who wants to watch them burn. Every attempt we make to rebuild, he lights another fire. The flames generate more revenue than reconciliation ever could." The king turned to Princess Anne, perhaps seeking a moderating voice, but the Princess Royal was already nodding. Anne is famously unsentimental when institutional survival is at stake. She is the hardest working member of the royal family, completing more engagements annually than anyone else. She sees the monarchy not as a family business, but as a military-style operation that must function regardless of feelings. When Anne spoke, she stripped emotion entirely from the discussion. She addressed the contagion, the risk Harry's financial collapse poses to the monarchy itself. "Trauma explains behavior," she acknowledged. "I understand Harry carries wounds from losing his mother, from the pressures of royal life. I have compassion." She let that settle, then delivered the verdict. "But trauma does not excuse financial recklessness. It does not authorize selling our family's privacy to the highest bidder. Compassion cannot become complicity." Anne held up the security costs file like evidence in a trial. He is spending $6 million per year on security that exceeds what most heads of state require. This isn't security, it's theatre, and we are being asked to fund the production. Then she deployed a metaphor that ended the debate. The monarchy is a ship of state. The captain cannot allow a sailor to drill holes in the hull just because he claims seasickness. You don't comfort him by letting him sink the entire ship. You put him ashore before he drowns everyone. Anne introduced the term that would define the rest of the meeting: toxic asset. In finance, a toxic asset is one that has lost significant value and cannot be sold because no market exists. She argued that Harry fits the description perfectly. As long as he remains attached to the royal balance sheet, as long as creditors believe the family will backstop his debts, the institution is vulnerable. Every decision he makes, every grievance monetized, every media stunt perpetuates a cycle of financial and reputational risk that the monarchy cannot absorb indefinitely. Had they attempted to pay this debt, Anne reflected, it would have been a catastrophic misstep, a validation not of compassion but of an unsustainable and destructive business model. Each pound handed over would reinforce a dangerous pattern, the notion that no matter how recklessly one behaved, the family would step in to repair the damage. That is not mercy, she insisted. It is enabling self-destruction while simultaneously placing the entire institution, the monarchy itself, at unacceptable risk. She looked directly at King Charles, her gaze unwavering yet tinged with a muted empathy, communicating both understanding and absolute firmness. One cannot save someone who, with each desperate stroke, intends to drag others under with them. The verdict was harsh, precise, and inescapable. Harry had become a toxic asset. This was not about punishment. It was not about revenge. It was quarantine, an urgent, calculated measure to isolate a financial and reputational contagion before it spread and infected the broader royal institution. The St. James Protocol, a blueprint for financial strangulation, had been fully conceived, and with the emotional debate resolved and the king's reluctant assent secured, the discussion concluded. Now came the methodical execution. Sir Michael Stevens opened the final folder, a document that would never see the light of public scrutiny, never grace the royal website, never be whispered in BBC broadcasts. It was history in paper form, and yet invisible to the world. It was, quite simply, the St. James Protocol. Designed with the cold precision of a corporate restructuring plan, the protocol was an operational manual for financial separation. Prince William, its chief architect, explained its structure with authority and clarity. Each of the 3 pillars addressed vulnerabilities palace analysts had identified in the Sussex dependency model, systematically dismantling the financial safety net Harry had relied upon for decades. Clause 1. The sovereign firewall, absolute, immediate, non-negotiable. William's voice carried the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. Effective immediately, he said. All royal financial resources are off limits to Prince Harry and any entities he controls. No direct transfers, no third-party intermediaries, no shared investments, no exceptions, no contingencies. This firewall ensured that even the most catastrophic events, foreclosure, bankruptcy, public humiliation, would not draw royal intervention. We are not suspending the Bank of Poor temporarily, he emphasised. We are deleting it entirely. If Harry wished to pursue life as a private businessman, he must bear the full weight of personal risk and failure. Clause 2. The global credit freeze, perhaps the most devastating strike to the Sussex brand. For years, lenders operated under the implicit assumption that the royal family would cover any obligations. That invisible guarantee allowed Harry to secure mortgages and loans at favourable rates, despite having little personal income. Under the St. James Protocol, Stevens explained, banks would now be formally notified, through private and discreet channels, that the Duke of Sussex stood as a financially independent entity. No guarantees, no collateral, no safety net. The invisible cushion that had allowed him to live above his means, relying on implied family backing, had been removed. His credit rating would now fall, not due to missed payments, but because the foundation of his creditworthiness had been deliberately dismantled. Clause 3. Legal firewall and communications blackout. This final pillar ended the half-in, half-out model that had created endless complications. There would be no more negotiation, no personal appeals, no influence from sentimental family members. All financial communications from Montecito were to be routed directly to external legal counsel, whose sole function would be to enforce the protocol without emotion, without compromise. The direct line to the king's checkbook was permanently severed. The document completed was a bureaucratic masterpiece, ruthless, cold, and precise. Harry's titles remained untouched, a symbolic nod to public sentiment, yet functionally he was transformed into a hollow shell, a name without leverage, a brand without backing. The Duke of Sussex had doors once flung open by legacy and privilege now closed behind him. William's tone remained methodical. This is not punishment, this is risk management. He demanded independence. He now has full responsibility. Signatures were placed on the internal memo. King Charles followed, deliberate, heavy. Princess Anne observed. By midnight, the protocol was active. Half a world away in Montecito, the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, indifferent to the seismic shift that had just occurred in London. Harry entered his home office, unaware that the tectonic plates of his financial and royal reality had shifted overnight. Calm, even cautiously optimistic, he proceeded as he had for 40 years, under the comforting assumption that the royal family would intervene if he fell. The Bank of Poor would always open. The palace would quietly save him from foreclosure, from aggressive creditors, from the very consequences of his choices. The reality arrived in a phone call. A legal counsel spoke with a professional, cold tone, devoid of warmth or compromise. "I'm afraid that is not possible, sir." Explanations of urgency, looming payments, and aggressive creditors went unheard. "The royal household is strictly prohibited from facilitating personal credit arrangements for the Duke of Sussex. The request is denied. Good day." The cold line, as palace insiders would later term it, had been drawn. Harry realised in that instant the full scope of the financial severance. Formal emails followed. Itemised invoices arrived for Frogmore Cottage renovations, and the message was clear. He was no longer a beneficiary. He was a debtor. Debtors pay what they owe. Desperate attempts to bypass official channels failed. Trusted aides, once buffers and conduits, were unreachable. Phone numbers were disconnected. Emails bounced. Private servers, long used to communicate family updates, photos, and personal news, were deactivated. Every bridge burned. Every connection severed. He stepped onto his terrace in Montecito, the Pacific stretching endlessly before him. Yet the emotional chasm between him and London felt even wider. For 5 years, he had fought a war against his family, assuming their protection would always be there. The St. James Protocol demonstrated otherwise. King Charles the Father had been overruled by King Charles the Monarch. The palace did not shout, did not leak, did not embarrass. They ignored him. They treated him exactly as they would any celebrity, rich, famous, and utterly powerless when the bill comes due. Without the royal safety net, without the invisible privileges that had shielded him his entire life, his credibility, his leverage, and his value in the eyes of creditors would inevitably plummet. He was no longer a prince in exile. He was, at this moment, nothing more than a man facing $100 million in debt, a series of disconnected phone lines, and the crushing realization that the life he had chosen came with consequences far more unforgiving than he had ever imagined. As the California sun rose over Montecito, painting the sprawling estate in hues of gold and shadow, the silence in his home felt heavier than any royal audience he had ever endured. The St. James Protocol was never about a single financial figure. It was about defining the true cost of freedom, the exact price a person pays when they attempt to rewrite the rules of privilege without honouring the responsibilities that come with it. The hard lesson emerging from this crisis is both simple and unforgiving. Freedom is never free. In life, as in business, there is always a price of admission. You cannot destroy the headquarters of a historic institution and expect the company to continue paying for your lifestyle. You cannot walk away from centuries of generational privilege while demanding the safety net and protections that privilege afforded. Harry had sought the autonomy of a private citizen while simultaneously expecting the unconditional support of a royal prince, a combination that was never sustainable. True independence means paying your own bills, facing your creditors, and navigating your failures without the invisible hand of a centuries-old monarchy smoothing every corner of your life. For decades, Harry had operated under the comforting illusion that the Bank of Poor would always be open. That belief had shaped every choice he made, from mortgages and media deals to lavish expenditures and high-cost security arrangements. For 40 years, he had assumed that, no matter how catastrophic his decisions, a safety net existed, invisible but unbreakable. But the St. James Protocol shattered that illusion entirely. There would be no more invisible backstops, no more quiet rescues, no more emergency interventions. The rules had changed irrevocably, and Harry would be forced to confront a world in which he, and he alone, was responsible for his decisions. Some will call William cold, unsympathetic, even cruel for refusing to authorize a bailout. Others will recognize the reasoning behind his actions. A rational CEO protecting a global enterprise from collapse, ensuring that one individual's mistakes do not imperil the entire operation. By cutting the cord, William did not destroy his brother. He forced him finally to face the full consequences of independence. The spare had become what financial analysts call a toxic asset, a liability whose potential for damage far exceeded its value. By erecting the sovereign firewall, enacting a global credit freeze, and enforcing a communications blackout, William ensured that Harry could no longer leverage the family name as collateral and that the system of unearned support had been permanently dismantled. From the moment the protocol went into effect, the implications were immediate and inescapable. Every attempted call to Clarence House, every back-channel request to aides who had once acted as buffers, ended in silence or automated rejection. Emails bounced back, accounts were deleted, old lines of credit were frozen. For the first time in decades, Harry faced the stark reality that he was financially and legally isolated from the institution that had previously sustained him. The palace was not shouting, not leaking stories to embarrass him publicly. It was ignoring him entirely. It was a cold, strategic decision. The monarchy treated him exactly like every other wealthy, high-profile individual in Montecito, rich, famous, and yet utterly powerless the moment obligations came due. As the hours stretched into a long Montecito morning, the weight of this new reality began to settle in. The mansion, once a sanctuary cushioned by family wealth and royal influence, felt like a gilded cage. Every document, every ledger, every reminder of past privileges now served only as evidence of responsibilities Harry could no longer avoid. The physical distance between Montecito and St. James's Palace was now mirrored by an existential chasm. He had not merely moved across the Atlantic, he had moved into a new reality where independence carried a cost that could not be transferred to others. This moment, harsh and humiliating though it was, carries a lesson broader than any individual royal dispute. Independence, whether in life, business, or legacy, is never granted without responsibility. True freedom comes not from cutting ties, but from owning the consequences of your choices. By attempting to escape the obligations of his heritage while retaining the privileges, Harry had created a system destined for collapse. The St. James Protocol did not punish him out of malice. It enforced accountability, restored balance, and protected an institution far larger than any one person. The broader lesson extends beyond palace walls. It reminds us all that autonomy is never absolute. Financial freedom, professional independence, and personal liberty are all bounded by the realities of obligation, consequence, and integrity. Harry's predicament is extreme, but the principle is universal. You cannot expect the systems around you, familial, societal, or institutional, to absorb the full cost of your choices indefinitely. When you step into the world demanding autonomy, you also inherit responsibility. When you burn bridges, you cannot assume that others will rebuild them for you. For those watching from afar, the story of the St. James Protocol offers more than scandal. It offers insight. It teaches about accountability, the delicate balance of privilege and duty, and the harsh consequences of misjudging freedom. It asks difficult questions. How far should loyalty extend when it risks systemic collapse? When does compassion become complicity? And what is the cost of independence when the safety net is removed, deliberately and permanently? If this deep dive into the secret financial strategies of the Windsors opened your eyes, consider supporting content that seeks truth over spin. Hit that like button to signal that real stories, unfiltered, carefully analysed and deeply contextualised, deserve attention. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because as the St. James Protocol unfolds and its consequences ripple across continents, we will continue to track every move, every development, and every strategic decision. This is more than royal drama. It's a masterclass in accountability, consequence, and the cost of independence. With the Bank of Poor officially closed, the real accounting has only just begun. Every mortgage, every past obligation, every stalled media deal now rests squarely on Harry's shoulders. Freedom, when divorced from responsibility, is a luxury few can afford. For Prince Harry, it is not just a lesson, it is a daily, relentless reckoning. Freedom without responsibility is not liberty. It is merely costly isolation, a life measured not in achievements or titles, but in obligations unmet and consequences unavoidable. And in Montecito, on that sunlit terrace, the full weight of that truth has never been clearer. Freedom without responsibility isn't freedom at all. It's just expensive isolation with a mortgage he cannot afford.